This video has spoilers from the novel that Bliss has just put out, so if you plan on reading the book for yourself, please note that this video will contain tons of information found within the novel. Chronicle: Fall of the Black Empire. With the Elemental Lords and their minions shackled within the Elemental Prison Plane, only the Naraki and the Akir stood between the Titan Forged and the Old Gods themselves. After having contained the Elementals, the Akir then became the Keeper's next main priority. Many of these insectoid creatures thrived in gigantic catacombs that stretched beneath the surface of primordial Azeroth, and so because of this, the Titan Forged called upon Arcadus to bend the stones and soil to his will, which in turn collapsed the tunnels beneath the surface, driving the insectoid legions above ground. But upon emerging from the darkest depths of their tunnels, they immediately found themselves completely surrounded by the Titanic soldiers. The heroic Titan Forge, believing the battle to be short and easily won, rushed the insects without hesitation, but these were no ordinary insects. These were the Akir, hell spawns born from the old gods themselves. The Akir fought back, viciously and without mercy, shocking the Titan Forge initially, but eventually as the battle drew on, the Keepers and their soldiers managed to split the insectoid ranks, destroying most of the Akiri race. Those that managed to scatter and evade death by the hands of the Keepers fled deep underground, too weak to devise a counterattack. The defeat of both the Elementals and Akir now heartened the Keepers, encouraging them all the more to fight on, for the sake of the Pantheon, and for the sake of Azeroth. But even though they were engaged in a winning war, they knew that they had to remain vigilant, for the greatest of battles was yet to be fought. Their next course of action was now to destroy the Black Empire at its mightiest temple city and bastion, at its heart, where Yogg-Saron dwelled. The Keepers thought if they dealt with the most powerful Black Temple bastion first, then the rest would soon fall easily behind it. But when they made their way to the old one, endless swarms of Naraki met them, swarming them and flooding the Titanic ranks. But even with legions of Faceless Ones bombarding them with attacks from all sides, the Keepers and the Titan Forged emerged victorious, breaching the city and finally making their way to Yogg-Saron. But when they engaged the old one, they were immediately shocked at how powerful the grotesque being truly was. Even the Pantheon grew worried that their forces would succumb to the overwhelming might of the Old One, and so it was because of this that caused Amenthol to take direct action. The mighty Titan reached down unto Azeroth and grabbed hold of Yogg-Saron. Then with one swift stroke, he heaved and tore the old god from the world, instantly killing the mighty being. But by doing this, Amenthol had created an eternal wound on Azeroth's surface. Yogg-Saron's tendrils had snaked far into Azeroth's core, and when he ripped the old one from the world, volatile arcane energies instantly poured from the scar and roiled across the surface. After witnessing this, the Pantheon and the Keepers realized that in order to save Azeroth, they could not kill the remaining old gods, for if they did, then the entirety of Azeroth might be destroyed completely. Left with no other choice, the Pantheon and their Titanic soldiers were now forced to imprison the malign beings rather than just outright killing them. And so they marched upon the Zoth's bastion, and after overwhelming the Black Empire servants and eventually the Old One itself, Arcadus created a subterranean chamber to contain it, while Mimiron conjured machineries to lock the Old God in place, and finally, Loken enchanted the prison which would neutralize the Old God's evil. After this, they marched southwest towards the temple city of Cthulhu, and did the same to this malevolent being as they had done to N'Zoth. They purged the Naraki legions that dwelled within the area, overwhelmed the old god, and then imprisoned it. With 3 old gods now defeated, only one remained between the existing reality of the Black Empire and the Titan's vision of an ordered world. But this remaining old god was the most cunning, resourceful, and manipulative of them all. Its name was Yogg-Saron, and it would not fall nearly as easily as Cthulhu or N'Zoth had. As the Titan Forge closed in on the northern stronghold, Yogg-Saron unleashed his mightiest and most fearful generals to meet his enemies. These generals were known as the Cathraxi, gigantic, monstrous warbringers that possessed unmatched strength, incredible intellect, and mystical powers that could drive even the resilient Titan Forged into madness. With the Cathraxi on the battlefield, their presence alone drove the other Naraki soldiers into a monstrous frenzy, swarming the Titan Forge, overpowering the Titanic servants and flanking them on all sides and brutally dismantling their ranks. In fact, the heroic Titan Forge would have been utterly defeated right then and there were it not for one keeper, Odin. Although he was greatly injured and fatigued from the ensuing battle, Odin gathered what remaining strength he had and rallied the remaining Titanforge to launch one last counterattack against the forces of the Black Empire. One final stand which would dictate the fate of Azeroth entirely. Odin sought out Loken in the midst of battle and commanded him to weave an illusionary spell which manipulated the Cathraxi into seeing themselves and even their master, Yogg-Saron, as the enemy instead of the Titanforged. Suddenly, the tide of the battle changed drastically. The Black Empire began to tear apart from the inside out. As the Black Empire servants brutally began turning on each other and attacking one another, Odin joined the fray by cleaving his foes and cutting them down since they were too busy waging war on each other and too confused by Loken's spell to defend themselves. The remaining and surviving Titanforged, inspired by Odin's bravery and sound leadership which ultimately turned the tide of the war and saved their lives, then followed him in eradicating the Black Empire once and for all. In time, the Titanforge were able to completely decimate the Cathraxi and Naraki legions, and together, they even managed to pacify the cunning Yogg-Saron himself. Just like the prisons that they had constructed for Cthulhu and N'Zoth, the Keepers then buried the being beneath the earth, and finally, for the first time in many long ages, Azeroth would finally see peace.